All right, welcome everybody. My name is Amy Archer Masters, and I'm staff of the pub, and we'll go ahead and get started today. Under Portland City Code and state law, the Portland Utility Board is holding this meeting electronically. Board members and relevant city staff are attending remotely, electronically, or by phone, and the city has made it available for the public to listen to the audio broadcast of this meeting. The public will have an opportunity to provide comments during the public comment portion of the agenda and can also provide written testimony to the board by emailing utilityboard@portlandoregon.gov. The pub believes and acts upon anti-racist principles in our meeting spaces and interactions with pub. While every person has the right to share their personal perspective, we stand against wrongful conduct, particularly any conduct that is targeted toward people that are made vulnerable by systemic inequities. This means stepping up as a community when there is wrongful conduct and fostering a space of learning and growth. The pub puts our principles into action by being active and deliberate, speaking up and speaking out. Each person is empowered to maintain the culture of the Portland Utility Board, and we focus on the impacted individual or population, condemning the conduct and not the person. I'll quickly run through our meeting guidelines. During the meeting, state your name before you speak, or if appropriate, who you're addressing or that you're addressing the group. The chat box is only viewable by the hosts, the two pub staff, Jonna Lynn and myself. Please limit chats to technical and logistical issues, including signing up for public comment, asking for technical assistance, or reminding us if you've been waiting to speak and haven't been called on. The raise hand function is primarily used by the board. I may lower your hand once you begin speaking just to maintain the flow of conversation. During public comment periods, the public can raise their hands and you will be called on when appropriate. If you're connecting by phone, you may need to press *9 to raise your hand. Videos may be turned on when speaking if desired. It is not required. Please mute your microphone when you're not speaking, and if connecting by phone, you may need to press *6 to mute and unmute. Public comment, as mentioned, will be taken during the comment period early in the meeting. You can sign up through chat with myself or Jonna Lynn, or raise your hand during the comment period. It's also available just prior to any formal board vote after a motion has been made and seconded by board members. This meeting is being recorded. So the quick run through of the agenda, we'll have public comment. We'll get talk about co-chair nominations and recommendation to the mayor for appointment. Spend some time looking at some visualization and tracking tools that have been shared by one of the pub members, Kyle. And then we'll spend some time talking about priorities for board members as we enter into budget information gathering and collaboration with the decision makers in the coming months. Then we'll wrap up with announcements and close the meeting. So let's start with disclosures of communications. If board members have any communications that they wish to disclose, unmute yourself or raise your hand. All right, I'm not seeing any, so we will move on to public comment. I do not have anybody who signed up prior to the meeting. Jonna Lynn, do you have any chats or
No,
requests?
no request for public comment.
So if there's any member of the public in the room who would like to share a comment, please unmute yourself and speak now. All right, seeing and hearing none, we'll move on. We do not have minutes for review and approval at this time, but they will be sent out before the next meeting, hopefully. So we will come back to that. So we will start with the first item, and that is, as we've discussed at many meetings over the past months, we've been looking for some volunteers to take over as co-chairs. Robin graciously has been co-chair up through December, and since our last meeting, we have heard from two folks who are willing to step up as co-chair. And then we have another pub member who may be available in the future, but not just right at this time due to some schedule conflicts. So um, Karen Williams, who has been on the board and is in her second 3-year term and has served as co-chair previously, has another 6 months left in her term and has volunteered to serve as a co-chair for the remainder of the time that she's on the board, as well as Lauren Rosenkrantz, one of our newer members who joined this past year. That would be for the longer 1-year term appointment if supported by the board. So I will open up the floor to Karen and Lauren. If either of you have something you want to say to the board in your volunteer for this role.
Yeah, happy to be here. Appreciate the opportunity. Just looking to get more involved and help move things along for the pub.
Well, I guess I'd just like to open by again thanking Robin for single-handedly holding the co-chair leadership position. So thank you, Robin. And thank you to Lauren for stepping forward as a new board member, offering to take on some additional responsibilities. So yeah, thanks to those two examples. I thought that I certainly had the capacity and the flexibility that I could do what I can to help out, to also, as Lauren said, kind of move things along, help us through this very interesting, exciting and transition time. Well, I guess we have transitioned, but so implementation of the transition time, spring 2025. It's just, there's a lot going on. So I'd like to do what I can to facilitate and help us, ask good questions and challenge the process, and yeah, do what we can to exert our influence as community members. And I really want to work with you all in moving those things forward. So hope to have your support in doing so.
So typically at this time, we would also have open discussion from board members and take a vote, since we would be formally sending a recommendation to the mayor's office for the appointment. Unfortunately, we don't have a quorum yet. There's a few board members that I was expecting to be here today who are not here yet, so we may have to come back to this item once they arrive. But I'd love to still hear just generally from the other board members if there's general support. It doesn't, the appointment process, I don't think requires formally a recommendation from the board. So as long as there is general support, it may be something that we could move forward with the mayor's office. But I'd love to hear from the rest of board members. Robin, go ahead.
Yeah, hey everyone. Just want to throw my support behind these two wonderful volunteers. I know when I first became co-chair, Karen was the chair before me, and it was definitely helpful being new in the position to have someone who had already been a little bit vetted. And so I think this is kind of the best opportunity to to use Karen at her maximum capacity for the remainder of her her board term, but also really give Lauren a really good foundation to stand on with having both pub staff, but also having just the vet that Karen is when it comes to chairing. And so I think this is a really good opportunity, as well as I was able to be kind of in the conversation behind the scenes about someone else who is interested, and just the way that it's set up where Karen will be in there for 6 months, Lauren will be for the end of the year. I think it'll offer us a good amount of transition time to also get another co-chair for the ending of the year as well. So I would say that I'm in support of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Thoughts from any other board members in the room?
This is Julia. I'll just second that. I mean, Karen has been, extremely invaluable and has is very familiar with the position, and I think Lauren is a fantastic addition to co-lead this space, and I'm excited for when we have quorum so we can vote on it.
All right, thank you, everybody. Oh, Lorraine, were you about to
I
speak?
just wanted to endorse that, and bravo to Lauren for stepping up cold. I appreciate it. And you couldn't have done it with somebody better at your side. Karen, you're well respected, and I appreciate you re-volunteering as you are as you said, as you are a short timer to help Lauren get her legs underneath her. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you, everybody. And I absolutely echo the thoughts that were shared. I think it's a great potential team. So I hope we'll be able to move forward. We're kind of in this gray space because we didn't have all the board members. We do have one of our potential board members, or pending board members, I guess I should call them, in the room as well. Helen Kilber is present, but because the appointment won't be official until it makes it before council, it's a little awkward to be relying on quorum for from somebody who they're brand new to this space. So I guess I'll just take the opportunity to welcome Helen into this space since you're in the room. But since we are just shy of quorum, we won't make a formal vote at this time, but I appreciate all the support from the folks in the room. So the challenge that we have is that our next topic, Kyle was going to lead. So it is some materials that he had developed for board members and wanted to kind of walk through and describe some of how he uses these tools and saw them as potentials for being useful for some other board members if there was interest in it. But without Kyle here, I am not as well versed in how he has developed it and how he envisions the use of the tools. So it is another topic that we will have to table until Kyle is in the room. And he did plan to be here today, so maybe he will join us a little bit later and we can circle back around to this as well. So in light of that, we will move to kind of the open discussion that we were hoping to have with board members. And I'll rely a little bit on Lauren and Karen in your kind of tentative new role as leads. once it becomes official, to help guide us through this a little bit as well. But we're really scheduling this conversation because we'll be hearing from the bureaus at the January 16th meeting a little bit more about, you had the initial conversation in December that was kind of leading up to the budget development and some of the challenges and what they're facing. What you'll hear more from the bureaus at the January 16th meeting will be, as they've continued to move forward, what they're putting forward in their budget documents to meet the mayor's guidance and what is required in this current budget season. So we'll learn more about those details at the upcoming meeting. And the intent of this conversation was to kind of step back from that and have a broad discussion. There was interest in some dialogue among pub members to understand a little bit more about any questions that you may have leading into that conversation. What information or framing information do you need to provide budget feedback as we move forward? And then more broadly, some discussion about how to effectively engage with new council members and leadership as you move forward through this process. So really an attempt to look internally and have open dialogue with one another about what would make you most successful as we continue to move forward. And then we will feed any useful information, of course, to Bureau folks many of whom are in the room today and listening, but also as they prepare for the upcoming conversations at the January 16th and the February meeting to make sure that they are preparing information that both provides what they think is important to share with you and also meets some of your desires and interests as board members. So I'm going to pause for a moment, and when anybody is ready, feel free to either unmute and begin speaking, or if we have many folks who are ready, go ahead and raise your hands.
This is Lauren. I'm looking forward to seeing what Kyle has put together because it would be really helpful for me to understand a bit more of like the timeline. Being a new pub member, it would be helpful for me to see some sort of visual workflow, like something super simple. So I'm not sure if that's something he's put together, and I would like to chat with him about it, but I'm thinking that could be useful for, especially with 2 new members coming on as well. For me, it would be really helpful to, just understand the workflow and the timeline of what the budgeting process looks like so that I can understand and, be able to work with the pub accordingly to understand like where our engagement can fit in. And I'm just a visual thinker, so I like it would be so I guess my question is like, does something like that exist, or is that something that we can put together?
Thanks, Lauren. That's a good question. I think it's probably a little bit of both. So we do have some tools and information, some very high level basic that we've shared either through the budget kind of 101 or finance 101 information that has been sent out. But I do have some other flow charts just about the timing of the budget and what it looks like. As the Bureau staff have shared at the December meeting, there's a lot that it has been in process of changing and evolving under the new leadership. And so even the way that guidance has come out and what needs to be submitted and some of those next pieces looks a little bit different this year than it has in the past, and I think will continue to evolve. So we'll need to continue to update some of those flowcharts and timelines and everything else that we've used in the past to make sure that they're evolving with the most recent information that we have as we move forward. But my expectation is, in many ways, a lot of the elements are still the same. Some of it is timing or what level of leadership is kind of at each phase of recommendation and decision making. So I'll be working on updating some of that information as well, and would love to have feedback on both at the front end, what could be helpful information for that. But then also when we get to the end of this, I hope that, when we debrief, I can understand, where you felt like there were gaps and that we could have been a little bit more thorough so that we can make sure that we improve it for the next round. And certainly, especially from so many new members having this be their first round through the budget cycle, particularly in a year that is evolving and changing. I think we'll learn a lot from you all because just having gone through it the first time, and it's always more challenging in the beginning because it does take some time to understand the bureaus at the depth that is needed to provide feedback, but we'll certainly do our best to kind of get everybody up to speed as quickly as possible and feel like you have the tools and information you need in order to give feedback.
Sure. Thanks, Amy. Yeah, I think for again, just as a new member, I've really personally just been hit with information overload and trying to make sense of it all. So thanks for all that information. I can absolutely review materials that we have already and then take those into consideration that, like you said, once the process is complete and maybe have some more valuable feedback.
Yeah, and there's really too much information. And so trying to figure out how to distill it in a way that is useful for you is important. So if there's particular areas, and we can also talk offline if that's helpful, to see if there's a different way for me to visualize or provide some information more succinctly so that you can have an easier tool to use. So I'd love to talk more about that as well.
Sure.
Lorraine, go ahead. Or Lauren, actually, Lorraine, before you speak, Lauren, I saw you unmute again. So if you wanted to respond.
Oh, no, nope. I'm all good. Thank you.
Great. All right, Lorraine.
Thank you, Amy. I think I would be leaning more to how does PUB want to engage with council leaders and shape decisions in the future. In my former life, working at the city of Portland, I actually worked on some research regarding it's not that. What's the name of the what's the acronym for the group of people who advised bureaus? Amy?
The BACs, the
BACs.
Budget Advisory.
Yes,
Yeah.
BACs. I did some research on the BACs and roles that they play. And what we discovered is that some bureaus use them as rubber stamps. So basically, one of the requirements was having a BAC. They had a BAC. The second role some played was being advisory. They have them there, they discuss, they bring them in periodically. And in very rare cases, the BAC would be intimately involved in the process of Budget Advisory Committee. Thank you, Amy. We do these acronyms and forget about it because it's not accessible. Intimately involved, very few. I don't know how many BACs or BAC performing grouping actually had an intimate involved in the planning, in having input and in having some clout in what the budget looks like. So I laid on that background information because it goes back, and I think we've been having this conversation in many forms as a pub over and over about how going forward are we going to be engaging with the council leaders and what role are we going to play. And what I've heard from Bob is that we need to be intimately involved because I don't know if Lauren know, January is late because the budget is finalized. Is this in April? April or May? So by the time we're coming into January and all of that, it is already late. Everything is probably set in stone. Most bureaus know what they're going to do, what is going to be cut, what is going to be whatever. And behind the scene action is happening about divvying up, dividing what needs more to happen and all of that. So here we are again, another year. We started this conversation last year that we needed to be involved when the whole process started. And when I say involve, I don't know, we probably need to define what that looks like because some people say, oh yeah, the pub was involved because the bureaus came to and presented to pubs at various times during the year. And then once we define what involved mean, then we'll know whether we are being given information. So there can be a rubber stamp, oh, we met with the pub, or that we are advisory, that our feedback is taken under advisement, or that we are going to be walking side by side intimately to have that conversation and share all the concerns, and that we are not dealing with independent decision at some point in time that, oh, we're not going to raise the rates that were recommended without a in-depth discussion on what that actually looks like. And yeah, it may sound good in theory, but really, does the residents of Portland understand what that could mean going forward? So I just wanted to share that. My concern is what role, how does PUB want to engage with council leaders and shape decisions in the future?
Thank you, Lorraine. I've noted that. If there's I'll pause and I'll let Karen speak.
Nope, please go ahead, Amy.
Okay, I was just going to say, Lorraine, in your comment, you speak about your interest in conversation or, you know, getting more in depth about what that looks like in the future. If you have any specific ideas or recommendations about what that would look like in a way that would feel meaningful for you as a pub member and for future pub members, I would appreciate any specific ideas that you might have about the whether it's timing or how the conversation unfolds, what the development process looks like, because that's something that we have been trying to evolve year over year and still struggle to kind of get to the right level of information sharing without information overload and engaging at the right time, trying to do it earlier, but ensure that it has the right content for it to meaningfully inform the budget development. So certainly appreciate any specific advice, particularly given your prior experience, both inside and in advisory capacities with the bureaus.
Amy,
Karen, go ahead. Oh, yeah, Lorraine, go ahead.
just to respond, Karen, I'm not jumping you, just to respond. So what does that look like? I think as pub members that we are here as a public utility board to make recommendations with regard to utility rates. Okay, that's one of our main roles. Correct me if I'm wrong. Hence the reason that is incorporated to some extent in the budgeting, forecasting and process, and where we're going to have shortfall, where we need what deferred maintenance needs to happen, blah, 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 blah. Okay, all of that. So if that is the case, then we need the POB as much information in a digestible format that we can do so informed. However, it is challenging when we are in this role and we make recommendations based on the information that we have with regard to certain rates. And then there's an arbitrary decision to go otherwise, and there is the consequences of that on the surface sounds good because nobody wants to pay more money. But however, the long-term impact is going to be worse. And that is concerning to me. And that is concerning to me because that is an equity issue. And the people who are most going to be impacted by that are the people who can least afford it. And I have spoken about my concern with the direction that the city is going. It seems to me, based on actions, that they are moving away from their mandate to be an anti-racist organization and ensuring that equity is centered in everything we do. So, I'm going to say it over and over. If we don't ground everything we do in equity, then we are not doing our roles well. And that is concerning to me. And we can only do so by having the type of information that we need to make recommendations grounded in equity so that we don't impact communities who have traditionally, historically been harmed by government. The city of Portland, the county of Moulton, the counties, the state, and federal. And we have many, many examples of actions by public servants that has harmed communities over and over. And those decisions are made at the budget table, where priorities are decided and who has power influences those things. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Lorraine. Appreciate that added clarification. Karen, go ahead. And then Rosalind.
Once again, Lorraine, thank you. And yes, I have a question and well, I think then the comment will be sort of based on the answer to the question, but I would first just like to say that I too am concerned about long-term impacts from kind of short-term decisions. And I say that with full realization, and I guess some grudging acceptance that we operate on biennial cycles and we make the budget process kind of forces us into making short-term, to thinking strategically short-term. So that's a shame. For the time being, that's the system we have. But I was thinking that, in the context of what would be helpful for me to have as I'm making decisions about, what is this budgetary information coming at me? What does that mean for impacts on community? Is having a picture of what saving money now costs us in the future. So, you know, how we are, what's the word? Kicking the can, I guess, right? And I think that there could be many like particular examples of that. I don't necessarily need all of them, but if we are presented from, you know, either of the bureaus that we've been directed to hold rates at this %, which means our budget is cut by, you know, $2 million, $5 million from what we had thought we were going to have. Here's where those cuts are going to be implemented, or where, you know, we can't invest in programs that we thought we'd be able to invest in. The next thing I'd like to hear about that is, and this is how much this will cost us in the future. So then we can make a decision about, does it make sense to save this money now? Because, well, and yeah, just we can just ask ourselves that question, and then we can opine, right? Does it make sense to save this money now? So that's comment. My question, and this is kind of an indelicate question, so I probably look to Amy to provide as much of a diplomatic answer, if any kind of answer can be provided. But my question is around the former mayor's budget guidance, saying that, you know, rates have to be held, or I should say rate increases can only be so much. But the second part is more concerning to me, which is, and you can't make up for it later, right? You can't, you know, in the next biennium, you can't like recoup some of these this, you know, money you're sort of foregoing this time. So my question is, like, how much heft, I guess, does the former mayor's guidance have at this point? And will the incoming new mayor, I don't know, get a chance to provide their recommendations and guidance? Is that an answerable question, Amy?
I'm not sure I can answer that question. And I'm not sure that anybody can yet. So I don't know, because it's still very early in the new mayor and the new council being in their seats. I know that the bureaus, the guidance that's provided is what the bureaus are operating under. And so the budgets that they're developing are to meet that guidance. Whether the new mayor will put out some slightly different guidance, I'm not sure. I haven't heard that that's happening, but I also wouldn't be surprised if there was some specific interest or intention of the new mayor as well. I think more likely it would unfold throughout the remainder of the budget process, because the process of the city administrators, you know, kind of working together and forming the recommendation, and then the mayor putting out their proposed, is probably where there will be a lot more dialogue between them as they do that, and information that they may request from the bureaus if it's at all different from what was in the original guidance. But I think it's too early to know, at least as far as I'm aware. It's too early to know, but we may know more in the coming weeks. I think it's a good question and an important one. And there's just a lot of uncertainty. I'm sure the bureaus similarly, are wondering similar things. It is an area, I guess the one thing I'll add, and then I'll pass it to Roslyn and Robin, is that it is an area where, regardless of whether the mayor, continues with the same guidance that was provided previously or tweaks it at all, that ultimately, if it is what is striking concern for the pub, that's one of the most important things to raise directly with the decision makers, both internally at the city administrator level, as well as sharing with the broader council, so that when it comes time for decision making, that perspective is brought to the table. The bureaus, of course, share the information directly throughout that process, but as the outside community perspective that you all provide and represent in your advisory function, particularly when it doesn't align with the direction that the city seems to be moving, that's important for you to document and make sure you're communicating to the right decision makers, so that it's, if nothing else, at least highlighted for the record and considered in the development of the next, round of guidance in future years. Roslyn, your hand is down. But I see you're unmuted. Are you ready to speak, or should I pass the floor to Robin?
I'll make a short comment.
Yeah.
So in response to Lorraine's comments around equity, I wanted to share that we have a lot of conversations within the Bureau and also in my own family at the dinner table around equity. And speaking personally, not as a representative of BES, although I am on staff with BES, as a community member, I feel that one of the important equity considerations, especially for communities who can't afford the very expensive water and sewer bills that Portland citizens have to pay, is that the service provided is the best, is the most efficient. It's kind of a hollow word, but that the return on the investment is that ratepayers are getting the most for the money that they're spending. And so part of the conversation that I haven't really heard in the pub or the budgeting space is acknowledging that there's a reality to revenue and budget constraints. I think that the pub should be challenging the bureaus to be more effective and more efficient with the monies that we have. And I don't think that, I personally don't feel satisfied yet with the very round numbers of the very large line items, and just kind of wanting to look under the hood a little bit and say, what are we getting for the money spent? If we can't have it all, then what are we getting? And is there a way to increase what the bureaus are able to provide with the money that's available? So it's a general comment, and that's all I'll say.
Thank you, Roslyn. Robin, go ahead. And then Lauren.
I just wanted to, mostly my comment is focusing on once we do decide how we want to navigate, if we agree with the previous mayor's recommendations or not, but just recognizing that we're working with a very new body of governance, and wondering if we have the capacity to be a little bit more political in the way that we get our wants and our needs across. And so previously we've of course as an entire body we submit like recommendations and memos for all of the counselors to read. But I don't know, because previously everything was siloed, so we only had one commissioner to focus on. With the new multi-district system, it's making me wonder, not only should we be providing recommendations to all of these counselors, but do we have the capacity to request individual meetings with specific counselors, where we could send representatives from the pub? I'm not sure if there's that 3-person, 2-person minimum required here, but to really engage on a more individual level with specific counselors that have shown that they align with our stated values. Because at the end of the day, the budget will need to be approved by 7 out of 12 counselors. And so it just has me thinking about like power mapping and figuring out where the counselors have at least previously stated their values are. And so when we talk about really wanting to focus on equity and making sure that it's not just a talking point and that we're putting money into those values, it makes me think of specific counselors that have essentially made their name on equity being a really important part of their identity and their authenticity as a representative. And so it just has me thinking, who are people that we should be, which counselors should we be seeking out once we have decided kind of where we stand on the upcoming budget? Should we be having more individualized, personalized conversations with them in order to find those shared values? And that way, in that way we can seek out common ground with the people we most likely have common ground with, and then figure out from there who are people we have some overlapping values with, that we think will have the same point of views with us when it comes to essentially the largest portion of the city budget, which is the water utilities. And so yeah, it just has me thinking, do we have the capacity to have like 2 representatives from pub request a meeting with certain city councilors that have expressed shared values that have aligned with our previously stated points of interest when it comes to the budget, where it would make it easier to get our values across the finish line into the final budget, versus just being a rubber stamp, or people genuinely agreeing that we have these values and they have these values, but somehow it's not coming out on the other end of the final budget. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. That's helpful feedback. Just as far as even in the past when there were fewer council members, that certainly has been an approach that PUB has taken before. And at least when it was done in the past and there was a policy issue that they were advocating on, the approach at that time, which certainly could be used, or some other version that aligns with how you envision it. But previously what they did was kind of come up with what their key talking points were, and then really divvied up the work among a variety of PUB members and groups of 1 or 2, kind of connected with the council members that they either had connection with, or if nobody did, then just 1 or 2 volunteers. And we tried to help facilitate getting those meetings to happen, and it aligned with what was being discussed, was kind of some key policy issues and talking points based on that. So that certainly could be an approach that is used again and be valuable. Lauren, I believe you were next.
I apologize. Can I just jump back in for one quick second to respond?
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
Yeah, just wanted to say that I am lucky enough to have a friendly relationship with at least 2 of the council members, and I have met at least 5 of them. So I can personally attest, or at least volunteer to try to kind of work that angle a little bit. And I hope that as a city advisory body, when we have our full capacity of 11 members, I'm hoping that we have at least one person from each of the districts if we wanted to see how we could be we could be working our interpersonal relationships on behalf of Pub and Pub's mission. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Yeah, staff, we could certainly facilitate gathering information from various Pub members to kind of do a little bit of the mapping of that if that was a direction that Pub wants to pursue. Lauren, go ahead.
Thanks, Amy. Lauren, voting member, just wanted to echo what Rosalind had said, and I think that's some information in terms to this third bullet point on the screen of information that I would want to, or sorry, the first bullet point, information that I would like to hear from the bureaus at the January 16th meeting is a bit more about what efficiencies are being put in place to help, reasonably so, to help alleviate the pressure of all the budget constraints so that not all of that is being passed down in terms of rate increases. And then to Lorraine's point, a lot of the reasons why I'm here, and I think a lot of us are here because we care about equity. And we all know that those communities, as she said, are going to be impacted the most are the ones who can't afford it. So what can we do? What are the bureaus doing to help alleviate those impacts to the most vulnerable communities? And I don't necessarily anticipate an answer now, but just something I would like to hear more about at the next meeting.
Excellent. Thank you. I also hope, and I don't know exactly what the budget documents themselves will look like, but they're in addition to what is shared in the meeting itself, because of course, there's limited time available, and we have highlighted it as an area of interest, and so I expect it to be some of the content that's shared. But typically the documents themselves also contain some information about equity. It's at a high level, of course, because it's covering so much of the Bureau's services, but typically these 2 bureaus do a good job of trying to capture that information in documents themselves as well. And there's a lot of documents to read through as staff. It can also try to help go through and highlight some key pieces or pull out any information that may be kind of buried in those documents to make sure that it can be easier to find if possible. So that's something that we'll work on as we see the actual documents as well. I know that the time and capacity to sort through that information varies from member to member and when the information is available. So we'll be working on that as it comes out.
Thanks, Amy.
And I think we've heard from most of you. I'll give just another minute or two for see if there's any other thoughts or questions.
I did want to share, Alexis couldn't be here today and wanted to share that the main thing Alexis wants to understand from bureaus is in their criteria and process for prioritizing and handling trade-offs between discretionary costs. So that's something Alexis is hoping to be able to discuss or hear from bureaus at the next meeting.
Thank you, Jonalyn. Karen and then Julia.
Right. Why don't you go ahead, Julia? I'll go next.
Oh, thank you. I was just, I don't have anything particularly new to say, which is why I didn't initially speak up, but I do just want to say, I think this is kind of a synthesis of what a number of commissioners have said. I think that providing really high quality service as best you can with existing resources is exactly in alignment with equity issues. Like, in order to do equity, you have to make sure you're doing as good a job as you possibly can with the resources you have. And I think this has been called out earlier, but I wanted just to kind of like, like also agree that in order for us as a advisory body to have influence and really help make sure that the city is making budgetary decisions more in alignment with our values, is we need information. We need the right amount of information early enough to have influence and power over what decisions are actually being made. So I think whatever it is that we need to do to try to make sure that we are getting the information that we need at the time that we need it in order to have actual influence before decisions are made is feeling really important, and something that's been missing in the duration that I've been on this commission. And I do think that it will be helpful for us to have those conversations with new commissioners or new city council members under this new system. Hopefully we can maybe kind of revitalize what this entity, what the pub has been in the past and what it can be again moving forward. And I also have a number of relationships with folks who are on the council. So I'm happy to try to participate in that as we move forward. And hopefully staff can help facilitate that with us. But yeah, I just wanted to maybe synthesize a little bit of what I was hearing and just kind of like plus one those concepts and concerns.
Thank you, Julia. Karen, go ahead.
Karen Williams, speaking voting member, I have only a +1/2. It's not a new concept, but maybe something for us to think about as how we implement and engage in all the ways how members have just been suggesting that we want to engage to be most effective. And I was just thinking back to the work session kind of concept. Like, we had in the past work sessions with the commissioner in charge. We obviously don't have that anymore. But could we sort of build on those relationships that some members of Pub have with new city councilors, and perhaps invite the beginnings of new relationships by, I don't know, sort of inviting, I guess, those councilors that have a particular interest and passion for the work that we do in the utilities, and not just utilities and watershed protection and restoration, but maybe inviting, anyone who would like to come and work with us and sort of brainstorm on what do we see in, the budget as it has been presented to us. Again, we're sort of coming in, as Lorraine has said, later than ideal. But, once we have both, meaning Pub members and city councilors, new city councilors have had a chance to dig in a bit to the budget information. I don't know what that means, maybe February-ish. Maybe we get together in a work session and obviously, public meeting and all, and, almost like ask each other questions. And what do you think of this? And what do you see in this? And what do you think the potential effects of this would be? And I don't know, that could be well, anyway, sorry, I'll stop there, but just an idea, and would love to down the road here if anybody thinks that that could be helpful in helping us do our job. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Karen. In kind of preparation for if there is interest in that, I'll also put on my our staff to-dos to connect with the right internal city leadership just about kind of work session scheduling and coordination with council and how that happens in the new format, so that I'll connect back with the co-chairs and the rest of pub once I have a bit more information and what that would look like. There is still in the existing code the defined kind of requirement or statement that work sessions happen between pub and council. That usually happens in fall. But the budget process certainly looks very different, and how pub engages directly with council around that, is changing. So certainly eager to have some conversations with the internal folks to see how that will continue to evolve and whether there could be opportunity for something like a work session with council members, or what else it could look like in that format. All right. Well, thank you everybody for the conversation. Any other final thoughts before we move on to, I do not believe that Kyle made it, so we will not be able to loop back to the other topic that we had planned, but we will connect with him as staff and see what kind of the next steps for getting that information out to folks and having that conversation will look like. I don't think we'll have time at the next meeting, since it will really want to focus on getting the budget information from the Bureau folks, and that likely will take the entire meeting time. So, but I'll find out what the right next step would be and connect with Kyle when we have that opportunity. Any other thoughts before we move on to final announcements and wrap up? And we will quickly run through kind of final announcements. You should have seen Administrative Review Committee information went out. We actually got word that due to lack of agenda, we don't have an ARC meeting for the January one, so we do not need a volunteer for that. But still planning through the rest of June. So let Jonalyn know any months that you may be interested in participating in administrative review committees. I know some of the newer folks have participated in some recently and also had positive feedback about how those have been going. So great opportunity to see kind of the actual, I guess, on the ground, how things are built and what kinds of issues come up. So it can be an interesting way to engage in that work and learn a little bit more about the bureaus. Also, as mentioned previously, we are still moving forward with the recommended appointment that pub approved for appointing the 2 board members, Becky and Helen. So we are hoping that takes place on February 5th as planned on the council agenda. So we're briefing council members on pub, and the 2 members will be appointed, and then that should be approved at that meeting. Folks are still engaging in the work now, and we're working on onboarding them and providing some of that foundation information. So thanks, Helen, for attending in person. Becky is also connecting and wasn't able to attend the meeting, but has been watching the videos. So keeping up on that as well. Any other announcements from the group or Jonalyn? So if not, what we have coming up, as you know, the January 16th will focus on Bureau information about budget and questions and answers that form from that. And then we will work on kind of what makes sense for the February meeting based on the conversations we've had today, as well as the other topics and what the follow-up should be after the next budget meeting. So we will coordinate with the co-chairs on that. And I think that brings us to an end just a little bit earlier than usual, since some of our topics were not covered in the meeting today. So there's a little bit of time if there's anything else folks wanted to chat about before we wrap up. And thank you, Lorraine. I got your chat about your availability for the Administrative Review Committee, so I will share that with Jonalyn. All right, hearing no additional comments, I am going to close the meeting and end the recording. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Amy.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.